Eye on Careers.
In association with laymoon.com, jobs, courses, and all things career.
This is Eye on Careers, the career clinic, charting your next move.
Hello and welcome back to Eye on Careers. We just heard the story of Mark Adams, Chief Executive Officer of Anglo-Arabian Healthcare. I think Mark gave us some very interesting insights, and he said, your failures are as important as your successes. And the idea is that if you're going through something difficult, or maybe your career's hit a bit of a spotty patch, that's actually the seed of your success, that actually there's great learnings in there and great takeaways, and that there is no one who rises to greatness who does not know failure. He also talked about the importance of having a passion, drive for what he does. Some of his most successful moments were fueled by blind optimism, the idea to just push through and have a clarity of vision and direction of where you're going, and again, don't be overconfident, but have a clear plan with short, midterm, and long-term goals. These were some of the big takeaways. If you miss his interview, you can catch it on our website on DubaiEye1038.com. But now we have a man who's slowly changing the world one tree at a time, a social entrepreneur who I think he's also been racking up a few awards, if I'm not mistaken. But you can also see some of his videos on YouTube as he marches around and with some of his tree planting efforts. He's the founder of the Treedom Group. His name is Andrew Steele. Let's hear a little bit about his background before we bring him on.
This is Eye on Careers, Executive CV.
Andrew Steele is the CEO of the Treedom Group. He is also the founder and director of Plant a Tree Foundation. Hull-born, Andrew retired from the Royal Navy after 13 years of distinguished service to work in the energy sector in Sri Lanka and subsequently the forest industry. Accredited with a master's degree in business administration from the Sydney Graduate School of Management, Andrew received awards for both e-commerce and management information systems. He was also the proud recipient of the Director's Award for All-Round Excellence in the MBA program. However, it was a social entrepreneur that his career would suddenly branch out to see him become a successful businessman across a number of sustainable and green business portfolios. Andrew recently became an honorary graduate at the University of Hull when a Doctor of Science was bestowed upon him by the University Chancellor, Honorary Baroness Bottomley of Nesselstone, in recognition of Andrew's environmental and charitable work with the Plant a Tree Today Foundation, which is committed to planting 1 million trees a year in tropical areas and is helping communities that are reliant on sustainability of forest ecosystems.
Well, Andrew, please welcome to Eye on Careers.
Oh, hi, Shane.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And what is the Treedom Group? It's a great name, by the way.
Well, we're a socially entrepreneurial company that not only looks at the bottom line, but we look at social and economic development within our organization.
And so, but the main actual commercial product that you do is oud, right?
That's correct. Product known very well in Dubai and throughout the Middle East.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in essence, you have a regular commercial company, but you've chosen to be extra socially responsible with the way that you're managing and growing the business.
That's correct. When not only are we a socially and ethically responsible company, we went to the next level and created our own charitable foundation that's registered in the UK and registered in Thailand, and hopefully within the next 12 months we've got a target to register in Dubai and plant 1 million trees.
And so the charitable organization is called
Plant a Tree Today Foundation.
Plant a Tree Today. And the vision is to have 1 million trees planted by when?
We're targeting 1 million trees by 2020 in Dubai.
In Dubai?
That's the aim.
Okay, so you're going to irrigate because it's desert here, right? You have to. You
That's
can't
right,
just
but
plant trees here.
There are certain species that do grow. They're indigenous to this region, and we'll analyse the situation and see what needs to be done to make sure we can actually achieve our target.
So you are going to plant 1 million trees here in Dubai.
Not personally, but I'm going to hopefully motivate a lot of companies and school children and other individuals to come along and join us.
A couple of them will be done by you as well, I'm sure.
I think I've planted enough over my time.
How many trees have you planted?
That's a tough one. Every time I go out, I look at how many trips I've taken overseas, and if it's a trip to Dubai from Thailand, for example, I need to plant 6 trees. So I'm out usually every other weekend with our team up in Khao Yai National Park within Thailand, planting trees.
Why do you have to plant 6 trees if you go from Dubai to Thailand?
To offset the carbon emissions from that trip.
Do you really do that? Are you serious?
Generally, yes.
You honestly try to make it so you have a zero carbon footprint by planting trees to offset your carbon emissions.
100%. I think one of my mainstays as I've gone forward in business is not to ask people to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So I'll roll my sleeves up and get out there and get amongst it.
And do you have a favorite tree that you like to plant, or?
No, they're all fantastic. They all do their job, and I think there's an environmental element that we've got to be considerate of.
Isn't there one tree that's more carbon efficient than the others? That's,
Yes, there are. It's trees that are fast growing, trees that can actually be used. Even people don't understand this, but you can grow trees and harvest them sustainably and allow them to grow, and it takes more carbon out of the atmosphere than leaving a tree in the forest.
Right. And what's interesting is all growing up in school, I was taught anyway that trees came from the ground. But effectively, trees come from the air because the biggest ingredient in the tree itself is carbon and light. And very little of the trees actually is taken from the ground itself.
I still need water.
They need water, but that also comes from the sky, right?
That's
so
true.
It's not necessarily coming from the ground. But that's another story. So you what prompted you to you quit your job in the Royal Navy and started this business, or how did it start?
No, actually I was working in the Navy and I was offered an opportunity in Sri Lanka. I was working in the power sector, actually polluting the atmosphere. And at that time, I'd actually started to invest in forestry, which is one of the things that we do. We offer an alternative investment into the forestry sector, which gives fantastic returns. And over the course of my
isn't that a double whammy? Like on one hand, you're working for a power company, and then on the other hand, you're forestry, so you're cutting down the trees. So you're like double time there. That's impact. That's effective.
Correct. I was working in the power sector, polluting the atmosphere, and I think I realized then that I could do something. I could invest in forestry and actually give something back that would also give fantastic economic returns. I think at the time I was looking at university costs for my children, and I looked at a certain investment and realized that by investing in forestry, it's a long-term horizon. I can get the returns to cover my children's education.
When you say investing in forestry, I think a lumber company that's going and cutting down the trees and selling the wood. What do you mean exactly by investing in forestry?
There are lots of managed investment schemes. We ourselves offer an investment into Aguilaria, which produces oud oil. I think people in this region understand that's a highly economically valuable tree, and from that we can pay fantastic returns.
And the tree survives the harvest of the oud oil, or?
That's right. We do harvest the tree, but we allow it to regrow. And that's where we come in as a sustainable and environmentally, ethically company.
So you were working the power industry. The money that you made, the profits, you said, where do I invest all this, oil money? And then you said, I'll put it in forestry. And then you were like, wow, this is actually a good thing. And then you quit the power company, or how did it happen? I
was actually offered another opportunity to head up a group of companies that were already in the alternative investment sector and forestry. So I took a leap of faith, really, and realized that I could do something outside of the power sector and my engineering background and bring a skill set to a different industry. I saw opportunity there, and I grabbed it with both hands, and it's a chance to stay in Asia. I think we've been in Asia 15 years now.
Well, hold on a second. You're working in a power company, and somebody just says, well, look, I need you to run this group of companies out of the blue. Like, how does that work? That hasn't happened to me. I haven't been saying, come and run these companies for us.
There's a course of events that had happened. I also, whilst out in Sri Lanka, I think I got on top of this situation. We had a 30% year-on-year growth in our power production. I was looking for alternative opportunities, so I set up a real estate company. Chairman of the company I eventually went to work for had seen what I'd done and liked what I was achieving, and asked me to come and join his company.
What did the real estate company do?
As rental and sales of property in Sri Lanka.
A broker, like a leasing, brokerage, rental, yes. Brokerage.
Yes, it's still going today.
So this is kind of, counterintuitive to your original DNA, where you're working in the public sector, in the Navy. You get out and all of a sudden there's this explosion of entrepreneurialism that's just flying all over the place. And you're in the power industry, you're making real estate companies, you're making forestry investments. Where did all this come from?
I think I was always an entrepreneur growing up, and I'd always had an eye for opportunity. From being a young boy, I used to get my mum to make marmalade, and she would go and sell it to work, but I got the profit. So I thought that was pretty smart.
How did you work that out?
There's
a lot of
very
mysterious
loving
things about you, Mr. CEO.
Well, then in the Navy, I realised that as the mobile industry started to take off, that Orange were offering free phone numbers, 0800 numbers at zero cost. And I realised you could use a charge card for 5 pence a minute. So I started to sell mobile phones and prepaid calling cards in the Navy and see an opportunity there. So I've always been entrepreneurial and had an eye for openings and capitalising on them.
So you're in so what was your job in the power company?
What
was it, like an oil and gas company, or what exactly?
It was a 51 megawatt diesel generated power station.
Okay, and what was your job there?
I was running the maintenance division.
Okay, so you're an engineer, basically an electrical engineer.
I'm not actually. I'm an aircraft engineer by trade.
So how do you flip and become into it? Isn't there a bit of risk there?
Certainly.
Take this aviation engineer and throw him in the power plant.
I was enjoying my life in the military, playing sport, and I'll try to use my wife's words, gallivanting around the world, and she made me make the commitment that when we were to start a family, I would leave. So I did, and I was being offered a lot of opportunities in the oil and gas sector, and then literally had a phone call. Somebody said, "We've got your resume in front of us. We like the look of you. Do you fancy coming to Sri Lanka?" My initial response was, "Where's that?" And I came across, I'm an aircraft engineer, and it was diesel power station. I said, "Look, I don't have any experience in this sector," but they wanted my skill set from the military. And he said, "It's pretty much the same principle as a gas turbine, suck, squeeze, bang, blow." And
what was that?
Engines run on a principle of suck, squeeze, bang, blow.
Of course they do, yes. Is there a little bit of the old boys network at work here? Because you're like getting jobs all over the world. Your CV's just kind of popping up. Is there a little bit of...
No, not. I think as I've grown older, certainly the old boys network comes into play, and I've learned that it's not what you know, it's who you know. But
that's what we call wasta in the Middle East.
Okay.
But so you seem to have a fair amount of it.
I think I played a lot of rugby in my time, travelled to a lot of countries, and over the last 20 years since I've been out of the military, that network's spread, and there's a lot of the guys still here in Dubai, in Hong Kong, Singapore, and in Bangkok. So, yeah, it's a pretty good network.
Do you think that's one of the things people overlook is the power of networking, the importance of having a power network, of building those relationships obviously through the military and through your rugby that you've been able to foster and nurture over almost a lifetime now?
You're certainly correct. I think that living in Asia and also now coming to do business in the Middle East, you can see how really you need to nurture those relationships to make business work. You have to ensure that somebody can trust you in what you're doing. And that doesn't happen on one meeting and trying to sign a contract. People have got to believe in the individual and understand the ethical element and what they're trying to achieve before they jump into partnership and try and do business together.
And that you're going to see that project through from start to finish and not abdicate halfway through.
For sure. I think that boils down to the ethical values an individual has, and you only really understand a person when you've started to work with them over a period of time.
This is a story of a social entrepreneur, a gentleman by the name of Andrew Steele, the Chief Executive Officer and founder of the Treedom Group. He's going to be sharing his insights into working in a socially responsible way and being an entrepreneur that's environmentally friendly. So stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Eye on Careers. I'm your host, Shane Phillips, and we are looking at the story of a social entrepreneur, a man who started his career in the Navy and then was parachuted once he left after 13 years to running a 51 megawatt power plant in Sri Lanka, I believe. And then from there started a real estate brokerage and then decided to start a socially responsible company called the Treedom Group, in which plants trees, sets off carbon footprints all over the world, and also makes perfume. This is a story of Mark of Andrew Steele. Andrew, welcome back to Ion Careers.
Thank you very much.
So I just had Mark on. Sorry, but yes, you're Andrew Steele. And so we were just talking about the importance of having a power network, of nurturing relationships, and how networking and having the right relationships in your career is really one of the foundation stones of a success story.
Well, that's true. I think you've also got to combine that with an element of luck, and by luck I define that as location, understanding, connections and knowledge. Part of that element is those connections, and you can only build that up if you've had a successful career and can deliver. You can prove what you can do.
You have to have a result. So luck is location, understanding,
connections and knowledge.
Connection. What's the difference between understanding and knowledge?
Oh, pretty much the same. You got to
understand. They're the same. You put two in there the same. You didn't think I'd notice?
You got to understand the business, but also have knowledge about the technical elements.
You have to understand the business, but have technical knowledge.
Sure.
And understand. That what is that understanding more like a vision thing?
Yeah, I think one of the things you talk about network, and one of the key elements for success for me really is also building a team, understanding the mechanics and the thinking of individuals and how to get those people to gel and work together. The team only works if the team works, and that's one of the things I think people fail to understand at this point. They put people together on projects and the dynamics don't always work, so you've got to understand the people that you're working with.
Do you think that, one of the things we were just talking with the last guest on is that, leaders today so often sit down and they'll do a review, and they're so interested in letting the staff or the employee know what they think or what's expected of them. And they're getting very little feedback into how they're being interpreted or what the staff actually thinks of them. And isn't that the fundamental, most important thing that a leader needs to know?
Yeah, 100%. I think, yes, we heard Mark talk about defining strategy, and that's correct, but you've got to be fluid. Top-down management isn't the way forward. We've got to look and listen to the individuals that are working, that are putting the strategy into operation, and understand their problems, connect with them, and make sure that the information they're feeding back is filtered. A business has got to be fluid. Unfortunately, you can't rigidly stick to the strategy. You've got to understand the dynamics of business and the pace of business, and change tack and listen to your guys. Listen to the people on the ground who've got their ear to the floor. And
so just to quickly just put a capstone on your career path here, you were working in the 51 megawatt power plant in Sri Lanka, and then when did you quit and you opened a brokerage house for real estate, or how did that work exactly?
I was working in the power sector, and at the same time, because I'd got on top of my position, I'll be honest, I wasn't challenged. So I looked to set up something to do. I'd had everything running within 30 minutes of walking into the power station, so I was bored. So I set up a real estate company. It was my first real step into running a business.
So you quit?
No, I did it in parallel. My wife ran it.
Okay.
And then I sort
of... The same thing you did with your mother with the marmalade. You re-echoed this.
That's right.
Your wife. She went out. Did you get all the profits? And
yeah, I suppose so. I ran the bank account.
You're dangerous. You're a dangerous man. So, okay. So you use the marmalade strategy twice here, and it works. And how long does the real estate brokerage work for?
Well, that's quite an endearing story. The real estate brokerage is still running. And my driver, when I was in Sri Lanka, I was fortunate as an expat to have a driver, now owns and runs that company. And 15 years later, it's still going strong.
Wow. So how did he get to own the company? Is he married to your wife?
No. Literally, as you know, people who are drivers, manager's a salesman, and he himself was in a position where he was working and he was remote from his family. He wanted to be back in Colombo. So he took a job as my driver, and he was also helping my wife with the business. And at the same time, over the course of his tenure with me, he actually managed to execute a real estate deal. He earned more money in that deal than he did getting paid as a driver. And when we were leaving Sri Lanka, I didn't have the belief in myself to go out and run a business. I had the security blanket of working for a large corporation. So
for the power company?
Yeah, for the power company. And a manager came up to me and said, "Look, what will you do with the business?" I said, "Well, we can either try and sell it or we can close it down." He said, "Let me run it." So he came across to Thailand and paid me a nominal fee about 3 years later, and he's gone from strength to strength.
That's an amazing story. And I mean, you just had the courage, I mean, to touch on one thing where you're talking about your own self-confidence and how that plays into a success story. Do you think that, that's one of the main things that are holding a lot of people back is that, they just don't have that self-confidence to go in. They have the skill set, they have the intellectual horsepower, they have the experience. They just don't believe in themselves enough.
I agree totally, and I didn't believe in myself, and it wasn't until I'd gone across to Thailand and running a group of companies. I actually had a major disagreement with the chairman of that company.
This is after the power company?
After the power company. I was originally headhunted to go and run a forestry company, and really the chairman wouldn't allow me to do what I needed to do to make that business work. Subsequently, that company has been delisted now in administration, and we've set up in direct competition with them, and 9 years later we're going from strength to strength. So I had the courage of my convictions, but at that time I was faced with the decision: step down because I couldn't work with the chairman and go back to the UK. The economic situation wasn't fantastic, so I thought,
plus
okay,
it's really rainy there as well.
Yeah, it's cold and wet. So we took the plunge, and I said, look, I know everything that we need to do to make this business work. Now stand by the courage of my convictions. And it's not an easy ride. It's been tough. It's been really hard. But I can say now, 9 years later, we went from 3 people. We've got 123 people. And
in how long? In 8 years?
9 years now.
You started with 3 people, and one of them was your wife?
No, actually, she was looking after the kids.
Okay. So you had made your money on her. You let her go.
That's right. What I did, I stepped away. I was offered an opportunity by an asset management company to audit their forestry investments in Thailand. I took the Thai CFO and the Thai managing director with me to set up on our own. And the asset management company dropped the ball, and I was faced with another challenge a year later where things seemingly were going along quite swimmingly, and we were backs against the wall. So we picked up the alternative investment element, and we've gone from strength to strength.
So you're hired by an asset management company to do an audit on their forestry assets.
Correct.
And then how does that fall apart, or you quit that job?
No, we didn't actually. They disrespected or didn't understand the local culture, and that's one of the big things that we pride ourselves on, in understanding the culture of the people that we're working with. False promises, really, and you can't do that to communities that you're working with that are reliant on the money that you're bringing to them. So we'd fostered really good relationships with them, and we picked up the ball where the asset management company didn't.
What kind of stuff did they falter on? Like they said they're going to build a school and they didn't do it?
No. It was basically purchasing plantations from farmers, but not delivering on promises with money. So they'd sign an agreement, and the money came.
They wouldn't pay the poor farmers?
Correct. They were delaying on their payments, and the communities that we were working with.
Tyrannical, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I 100% agree. And so the community said, look, we don't want to work with them anymore. So they stood by their ethical values, even though they had a pot of gold allegedly coming to them, and they worked with the people they believed in. That was us. So
you got in a fight with this chairman who...
I was the former company.
You were the former company.
That was with the former company. This was purely the asset management company disrespecting the culture and not understanding the people they were working with. So we picked up the ball and we ran with it.
And so you registered. What was your first deal? What did you buy? You buy like a small plot of land to start with, or how did it all start? We do own a significant amount of land now in Thailand. Initially, what we did was we purchased the forestry assets from the farmers, and then. But you wouldn't have had that much money with 3 people. Like
correct.
How much land did you buy for the first transaction?
Oh, probably only around 10 acres.
10 acres.
Yep.
And then you sold those carbon credits? Or?
No, we did that through our charitable entity. No, what we did was sell investment into Aguilaria that produces the oud oil.
The oud, okay.
And then we subsequently invested every single penny we had back into the manufacturing facility, what was essentially a cottage industry, and we've grown the business to be the only company in the industry in Asia that actually has ISO accreditation. And we pride ourselves on consistency, quality, and being able to supply the major perfume houses, not just in the Middle East, but in Europe. Arabian Oud, Ajmal, Mulhausen, CPL, Chanel buy from us as well.
Chanel has oud in it. I didn't know that.
I think most companies now are realizing the benefits of oud, but they're using synthetic and not the real element, the real deal.
Oh.
And because of the cost, it's absolutely astonishing, the price. If you go into Arabian Oud shop in Dubai Mall, you can pay $70,000 for a litre of oud oil.
Wow. Well, that's quite. But it's an interesting concept what you have here. So you were basically running a regular manufacturing agricultural business, and then you said, "Hey, our competency is in agriculture, it's in planting trees. So our CSR initiative should match and graft on to the core competencies of our organization, of our people, and therefore leveraging and increasing and maximizing the impact that you can have in the community."
Correct. Well, we've got the social environmental element from our business, and we make sure that everything we do is environmentally friendly. But in parallel with that, we also have our own charity, where I think we planted probably 10 times more trees with our charitable entity than we have commercially. And what we do is make sure that our guys work with two hats. So the business pays their salary, but they're committed to doing the charitable projects when companies come in with CSR revenue for us.
And this is a future trend now that we're seeing. In fact, they're saying the millennials coming in now, and those teenagers who are now, for example, in Harvard's and the big business schools, they're not so interested in just turning a profit. That they want that, this theme of being socially responsible is starting to take foot. And that now they even have a new legal entity in Canada and the United States. They have 1,000 B corporations registered. I don't know if you've heard of this B corporation. And this is basically a structure where it's a legal structure. So you have the corporation, and the B corporation says we have two mandates. One, to the shareholders to drive a profit, and two, to the community to make an impact. And then there's also a licensing. So that you're environmentally friendly, that you're meeting all the humane, workers' rights, et cetera, and your products, your manufacturers, if you're shipping something in from China, for example, that factory has to be also licensed for you to maintain your status. I don't know if you've heard anything about this trend.
I've certainly not seen the Canadian element, but you can see a paradigm shift throughout the world as organizations start to take more notice of CSR elements, and that's driven by the consumer values. People are not asking, what are you going to do for CSR? They're actually analyzing what you've done. And the sad thing is, for a lot of large corporations, blue chip organizations, it's all about the marketing dollar from CSR. Not all companies truly believe in what they're doing. They're looking for the picture to shake hands and put it in their annual report. There are a lot of companies that are very, very ethical and stand by their values, but unfortunately it's not every single one. Although the tide of change is there, it's starting to come.
Do you feel that this makes you a stronger leader, because fundamentally you're not just telling your staff this is what we do, but you're telling them this is why we do it?
Certainly, I think you've got to stand up and be counted. You've got to lead from the front, and I'm not saying people will follow, but you, as a leader, you do take your troops into battle, and if people can see you doing the right thing, they're more inclined to follow suit and continue to do that. You mentioned a new breed of people, and what I see now is that environmental issues are more prominent in school. So people that are coming out of school now that are potential future leaders of industry or future leaders of countries understand those environmental elements, and so it's a big part of our charity is actually environmental education. Those children, when they grow up, will make the right decisions in business. They will take into consideration the environmental element and not just the bottom line, looking at the P&L all the time.
Do you think that's something that we may have lost heading into the crisis? Have the leaders of today forgotten their values? Is it very difficult to find that value-based leader? We're going to be answering that right after the break. This is the story of Andrew Steele, one of the region's top social entrepreneurs and the founder of the Treedom Group. Welcome back to Eye on Careers. I'm your host, Shane Phillips, and we are looking at a man who is changing the world one tree at a time. He runs a profitable business, a commercial business, oud oil, one of the most expensive, I think, tree products out there potentially. I'm not 100% informed on it, but I would guess it would be the case. But he's taken his business one step further and not just focused on the commercial elements, but also said, hey, look, as an agricultural company, our strong suit is in growing trees, planting trees, and so he has started a charitable foundation with a vision of planting 1 million trees in Dubai. I thought it was a little ambitious, seeing as this is a desert and it's not so easy to grow trees here, but he's not dissuaded. With 13 years in the Navy, he is quite a determined, tenacious leader and a man of interesting value system. He is the founder of the Treedom Group. This is the story of Andrew Steele. Andrew, welcome back to Ion Careers.
Okay, thank you.
And, I think that's really interesting, what you're doing, and you're seeing other entrepreneurs like yourself sprouting out saying, we want to have a value in what we're doing. And I was wondering, when you look at industry today, business leaders today, have they lost sight of their values? And often, even when you have a leadership dialogue, very rarely does actual values come into the play. And when you look back at, say, the banking industry, we saw in the financial crisis, bankers seem to have lost sight of the value that banking plays in society. It's a fundamental key to freedom. It's the bedrock of your ability to change your economic status. And the early banks in America, for example, gave the working class access to credit, gave the working class the working capital they need to run their small farms. And now, nobody really talks about the role that the banking industry plays in the freedom of an individual to chase their livelihood. Have they lost the value of their profession? And do you feel that's something that's basically a narrative that's been lost over the last 2 decades in the economy?
Most certainly. I think that you can see that people have lost their values, and that, to me, really defines the difference between an entrepreneur and an employee. Some of the employees are looking at the corporate grind and probably don't understand the values of the business or their individual values. So for me, as a social entrepreneur, I stand by the values that are in my heart, and our team understands that. That is communicated downwards, so that in everything we do, we understand the vision, we understand the values, and we emulate that in all aspects. A lot of people, a lot of leaders, if they don't understand what values they're standing by, then how can they enact it in the business? They don't know what they're fighting for. They're just going through the corporate grindstone and the day-to-day run-of-the-mill, treading water until retirement, or they hopefully don't get sacked.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's a fear-based, and when you look at the values, then this what courage is. For example, if we look at the story of Gandhi in his own autobiography, he describes himself as a coward, and early at one point in his life, he's actually even scared of the dark. But then this same man, self-professed coward, stands up to the greatest danger of all, grave danger, almost beaten to death repeatedly. He was severely beaten several times. I mean, even thrown off a moving train. Where does this guy who's scared of the dark all of a sudden find this immense courage? And it has to come down to values, that he values the Indian identity, that he values the freedom of his country over British imperialism, that he's willing to die for it, and in effect, he eventually does get assassinated and does die for it, and with a smile on his face. So fundamentally, when we look at courage, it's not just this innate thing that you're either born with or born without, that it actually stems from your value system. And without having that strength in your values, you can't be courageous.
Oh, 100%. I think you've got to stand by those values. You've got to stand up and be counted. And if you're not willing to do that, then who are you as a person? And how can, as a leader, you ask people to follow you and really put into operation the values of your organization?
So in a sense, when I look at your story, it almost seems like you were forced into entrepreneurship because you could not find an organization with the right values that resonate with you as a human being.
Correct. So when I first went across to Thailand, the company was stating that they had ethical and social values, but they didn't actually really do that on the ground. And I challenged that. That's one of the reasons why I fell out with the chairman. But I also looked at the business model and said, the plan, well, you don't have a plan. So let's put a plan in place. And we couldn't actually agree on those values. So I stepped away and did it myself. It's a challenge, but it's what I believe in. And you've got to have the courage of your convictions.
And I like what Voltaire said. He said, no snowflake in an avalanche feels responsible. And in essence, we're all playing this game and passing the buck. But, do we even as consumers have a responsibility to say, we are now not going to do business with unethical providers. And you saw that in the turmoil. There were certain leaders of other countries who fell, and then all of a sudden the international community said, oh, that person was tyrannical and blah, blah. I said, well, hold on a second. Who is buying his oil for all this time? Are you not responsible? Did you not fund this position? Do we as consumers now have a moral onus to ensure that we are only supporting ethical business operators?
I think you can see that evolution over the last 5 to 10 years, really. People have become more aware of the social and ethical values of companies and are willing to work with companies that are standing by their CSR programs and not employing child labor, for example. In the manufacturing industry, we've seen a sports garment company completely revolutionize its manufacturing industry because it was chastised over child labour issues. And I think that companies are now listening to their customers and adopting those values and making sure that they are abiding by them, because the consumer is right. They will switch if they feel that it's not viable, it's not ethically viable, and they'll move to a supplier that is. We notice it in our own industry as well. Over our time now, we're finding more companies asking for organic products, making sure that we're considerate about the environment and the area we work. Not just that, but we're also seeing that we work with an endangered species, so we have to provide CITES certification. It's Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, whereas previously Aguilaria was an illegally traded product and still is to this day.
How is it illegally traded?
A lot of poachers will go into the national forest and take trees from the wild, and these are trees that have been there for 100 years, and they'll sell them. We work, as I said, very sustainably and ethically, and Aguilaria trees can be planted in managed plantations, which is what we operate.
So there are tree poachers out there.
There are. It's amazing. Yeah. I think over my time in Asia, I've seen huge trees just been felled and the side of the road, which are now going from Myanmar and Laos into China, into the manufacturing industry for tables and chairs and furniture. Now we're seeing companies adopting Forestry Stewardship Council principles, and buyers, the big Home Depot type buyers, only buying their product from sustainable and ethical sources.
So this is a big trend that we're seeing, and a lot of people are saying the millennials now that are entering the workforce are going to be the most empathetic workers that have ever come, and in fact will be looking for that sense of identity, sense of self, and that value system to be echoed within the organizations through which they work. And I guess you fully agree with this.
Certainly. I think for me that's in my heart. One of the things, if you talk about forestry in particular, it takes a minute to chop a tree down, but it takes 50 years for it to grow back. So people don't understand the dynamics of that, and that, for me, ensuring that companies are becoming more ethical and environmental in their thinking is going to really make a difference with our planet and the future of our planet. Remember, you've got to look at the words of David Attenborough, and how can you look your grandchildren in the eye and say that you knew about the state of the planet and the things that were going on and you did nothing about it? So that's really where I see a huge shift in people's thinking.
I think what they're seeing now is the urbanization rate is so high, and you're now seeing a huge amount of people moving from the poverty class into the middle class. And in fact, I think one stat, I was speaking with one of the CEOs of a big FMCG company, and he said that by 2030, 2/3 of the world's middle class will be in Asia. And he said if they consume at the same level that America does, as America's middle class consumes, we will need 2 planets to support this level of consumption. So is it not too late? Have we gone too far? Is it not, how are you going to stop this consumption machine?
Okay, most certainly there's an element called ecological debt, and it's a date each year where the planet cannot sustain the people on this planet, and it gets earlier and earlier. So not everybody understands that. I think we have to preach that message, and people will start to make the change. I was listening today in Dubai. There's one of the companies talking about gardening and organic produce from your own home. People will start to do that. You'll realize that we can't continue in the way that we're going. It's got to change. It's not just talking about climate change, but all environmental issues. I mean, For me, I'm an animal lover as well. You know, we keep deforesting at the rate we are. Where do all the animals live? You know, there's so many different elements as well, not just around the ecological dead, but the environment as a whole. And we've got to change people's thinking. It's really it's paramount. It's paramount importance.
Yes, I was hearing an interesting story about a bacteria in a bottle. So you have a bacteria, and every minute it doubles in population, and it's in one bottle. At 11 p.m., it's one bacteria in the bottle. By 12, the bottle's full. At what point is the bottle half full? And of course, that would be, I'm not going to make you do math here at the show, but at 11:59, the bottle's half full, right? And at 11:58, it's 25% full. And, at 11:57, it's 12.5% full. So you have this huge space. At what point, if you were a bacteria, would you realize you're 3 minutes away from certain death? Now, take it the next step and say the bacteria is even very technologically advanced. So they go out and they go at 11:58 or 11:59, say at 11:59, they go out and get 3 more bottles. So they increase their resources by 300%. How much longer can they live? Well, by 12:01, 2 bottles are full, and by 12:02, all 4 bottles are full. So this is basically the scenario of an exponential growth against a finite resource, which is what we face. We are no different than that bacteria, wouldn't you say?
100%. And how far do you go with this? I think that reality is what you're saying is correct, but unfortunately, not everybody understands the context of this. And do we sit and wait until it's too late? Or do we take some action, or do we take changes in our daily lifestyle and adopt them so we don't enter into this problem? It's too late in 20 years when you say, hey, we knew about this in 2015, but we did nothing about it. So I think concerted effort really to make changes, concerted changes has got to be taken. Some
big changes happening in the world, and one of the people leading that is Andrew Steele, the social entrepreneur and founder of the Treedom Group. He is going to be sharing his secrets to success in the social entrepreneurship space. So stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Eye on Careers. I'm your host, Shane Phillips, and we are living in an interesting time where businesses are no longer just focused on profit. They have a triple bottom line. They're looking at people, they're looking at profits, they're looking at the environment. And one individual who's really leading the charge on this initiative is a gentleman by the name of Andrew Steele. He's the founder of the Treedom Group, and his business, he sells oud oil, which is one of the more lucrative agricultural products that you could have. But he also runs a charitable organization because he's in basically the tree business. So he's been planting trees, and his vision with his charitable organization is to plant 1 million trees right here in the City of Dreams, Dubai. Andrew, welcome back to Eye on Careers.
Yeah, thank you.
It's good to have you here, and it's been interesting, when you look at some of the environmental issues that we're facing, and the growing number of companies now that are saying, look, let's look at what our business does, what's our core competency, not only use that to drive a profit, but let's also use those capabilities to drive an impact in society. And I saw there was one company, a restaurant, and they made these little chips that you take this chip and you give it to a homeless person, and that person comes in and they get a meal. So instead of giving a homeless person money who they may be using that for something other than food, as we all know, this chip can only be used for food. And he did that, and I think now the police department in his neighborhood, as part of their normal kit, take his chips with him, and it's been a huge, it's just been a runaway success. And of course, he never did it to make money, and that's the purpose, is that some of these offerings that he's given to the community, he does at cost or even at a loss, because he's that passionate about making an impact. And this is a new sprouting of and you're part of that movement.
Oh, that's right. I think we've adopted a strategy that people are starting to move towards, and it's for us very endearing. We're quite happy that we can be nominated as a sustainable and ethical organization.
Well, nobody comes on the show without being asked, what's your secret to success?
Eye on Careers now reveals the secrets to success.
So Andrew, what's your secret to success?
I think it's respect every individual within the organisation and communication. Remember, people are human beings and they're not just an employee number. And don't ask somebody to do something that you're not willing to do yourself, unless you technically can't, of course.
Eye on Careers.
In association with laymoon.com, jobs, courses, and all things career.
Yeah, I guess I would have to fire my accountant then if I took your advice, because those I don't understand. They do all of these revenue statements, balance sheet, and then the numbers that they come up with doesn't match the numbers that's in the bank. And I say, well, why is this? It's accrual accounting. So it doesn't make any sense, but it's another story.
Efficient tax planning, I think, right?
Yeah. You never know. So what's been, you've ramped up from 3 people to 120 now.
Yep.
And growing. What have been some of your biggest failures or the biggest moments where you've basically fallen down and had to pick yourself back up?
I think that there's numerous failures that you come across, certainly as an entrepreneur. And when I look back over the years, there's countless. We've gone into various projects and we haven't planned accordingly. We've gone into it on a gut feeling as opposed to a good feeling as well. And we've tried to be reactive to the situation. But the biggest element for me is to fail forward, understand the mechanisms by which you failed, take a step back, reevaluate, and go again. And unfortunately, not everybody does that. They keep ploughing forward and sometimes not taking a step back just to understand what went wrong and communicate that with your team.
One time when I was a kid, I was running so fast. I was a little bit hyperactive. And when I was running up the stairs, I was running so fast that when I tripped, I actually fell up the stairs. I don't know if you've ever done that, but I literally fell up. And, I think when you look at people who are really successful, they don't stop. When they fail, they shake it off, and like you said, they analyze, they look at what we need to do different, and they get right back in the game. Where another person may say, "Oh, this just wasn't meant to be. This isn't working out, and it's not. I always have bad luck," and they throw in the towel. Is success simply defined as getting up one more time than you've been knocked down?
100%. I think a lot of people have got a fear of failure, and look at mergers and acquisitions. Probably 1 in 12 is successful. You look at the situation, everything is a speed bump on the road. You've got to be willing to wake up every day, in my opinion, look at a brick wall and jump out of bed and say, hey, I'm going to run at that brick wall, I'm going to knock it down. The day you don't do that, the day you get out of bed and you think, I don't want to do this anymore, change industry, change your job. You've got to have that passion. You've got to have that drive and energy, and that also emanates down to the people you work with. They look towards the guy at the top to provide leadership and inspiration, and they follow his energy. They follow the drive and the passion that he's got. So you've got to pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and be ready to go again.
So if you are out there and you have lost your job, or your business isn't going well, or you just made a business decision that lost millions, you should get down on your knees and thank God, because you just take the first step towards success. The more no's you get, the more failures you get, the closer you get to that big win. Your next punch just might be a knockout, so you have to keep swinging. But Andrew, let me ask you, isn't there some days when you wake up and you're just overwhelmed? I mean, you're running this global business on, at beginning on a shoestring, because you just don't have the manpower or the people power to make it happen. Aren't there certain days where you're like, oh my God, I have to do my financial statements, I have to do my marketing plan, I have to make 700 phone calls, I have to answer these. It's just overwhelming.
Yes, it can be overwhelming at times. And certainly when you start out and you're on your own, you're doing a lot of the work yourself. But life's a roller coaster. That's Forrest Gump. Life's a box of chocolates. You don't know what's going to come next. That's the challenge. You've got to thrive on the challenge, and you've got to understand there are ups and downs in business, and it's just the same as life. One day it can be going fine, but the dynamics and the pace of business can change overnight, and you've got to be prepared for that.
When you look at the Forrest Gump story, one of the great things about it is, as they say, run, Forrest, run. He just kept running. He was tactically very strong, and he didn't let negative ideas come into his mind. Partly was maybe because he lacked the analytical abilities necessary to realize what the negatives were, what the real risks were. He was just really acting, and he stayed focused step after step. He ends up running across America and all the other things. Is that the most important thing, is to be tactically strong?
I think when you talk about tactics and strategy, you have to have a strategy, but you have to be able to change the tactics. It's a bit like a football game. You can talk about the strategy before it, but at half-time, if things are not going well, you've got to change your tactics. So yes, for me, tactics are paramount, and the ability to be proactive, not reactive to a situation.
But you sound very positive. Now, do you do anything, like I've had other guests on who have a vision board. I have people who use different techniques to maintain a positive mental attitude and positive focus. Do you do anything in that area to keep yourself on point?
No, I don't. I'll be quite frank. I think for me, I'm passionate about what I do, so I wake up every day. It's a bit like Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods plays golf. Why? It's not necessarily about the money. It's because he loves what he does. And I love my job. I love what I do, so I get up every day, and it's not work for me. It's my passion. I enjoy it. I enjoy the challenge and the thrive of business.
Even when you're out there, there's like mosquitoes and sweating and you're like digging muddy holes and putting trees in it, you're like, oh, I love this?
I think I've been very privileged to work with hill tribes in the northern Thailand, and it's taken to me to see some amazing sights and some amazing people and understand some fantastic cultures. So I really do enjoy it.
A hill tribe?
Yep, people in the northern part of Thailand that have come across from Myanmar.
And are they like, why are you planting trees? They must think you're crazy.
Actually, no, these are people who probably far removed from social media and TV, but they understand on the ground the effects of deforestation and climate change. They can see it themselves, and when we put the trees back, it's great to hear villagers say the birds are back. We can hear the birds singing in the morning. We've now got water because of watershed management elements. So that for me, is really taking it to the far end and seeing it at its grassroots element.
So it's a deep sense of purpose, really, when we look at what one of the main themes of your success is that deep sense of purpose that, this is much larger than the next business deal. This is much larger than the next shipment of food oil. This is about making a difference in people's lives.
100%. I think, one pebble in the ocean just makes a small wave, but 100 people throwing those pebbles makes a bigger wave. So my job really is to motivate people to understand the environmental element and get them to support our work. I can't plant 1 million trees myself. I need to get people to join me and join our crusade.
What is your final piece of advice for anybody who wants to join the social entrepreneurship ranks or get involved more in these type of endeavors?
I think it still goes back to having a passion. Understand something. Find something you love to do. If you're passionate about it, it won't be like work. It's like Tiger Woods plays golf. You'll go out every day. You'll overcome every challenge because you believe in it deep down. And we spoke about values. You have those values at your core.
And find out what you believe in. And I think also within that subtext is a sense of identity. That this is who you are. This is your life's work. I mean, one of the fundamental difference with you is you don't have a job. You have a life's work.
That's correct. And that's one of the questions I often get asked. How do you find your passion? I'll be honest, I don't know. It just hit me. I think it evolved, and I woke up and said, this is what I need to do. And I can actually put food on the table for my family as well and do something that I love.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for coming out, Andrew. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime soon.
Okay, I'd love to do it.
Great. That was the story of Andrew Steele. He is the founder of the Treedom Group. You can check him out online, and there's a couple of YouTube videos out there as well floating on the net that you can catch as well. You can also catch any part of the story you missed on our website, DubaiI1038.com. And that's it for this episode of Eye on Careers. I'm your host, Shane Phillips, wishing you luck in chasing your dream.